Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Amit Patankar and this is the first time I'll be speaking to my viewers directly. If you've watched other videos on my channel, you would know that I love to build Stirling engines and a bunch of other interesting things. I also like to test my builds under a range of different conditions. Back in 2018, when I first started posting content on my channel, the videos were mostly about my engines which I built and studied over several years. Some viewers and friends suggested that I should make tutorial videos on my engines or videos about the problems I faced and any important tips that would be useful for any future Stirling engine builders. And so, after many million years, I have decided to take up that task. Well, sadly, my engines aren't with me right now. I am based in Canberra, Australia, and my engines are with my parents in Mumbai, India, at our family home. Yeah, I miss them so much. I mean, both my parents and my engines. But the good thing is, I have this little Stirling engine here with me, which I borrowed from the amazing folks at ANU Makerspace. The ANU Makerspace is a hub for all creative activities across the Australian National University, spanning a variety of disciplines such as arts, crafts, rocket science, robotics, I don't know what else. Pretty much anything that requires making something. Now, I didn't make this engine. It was made by this person. So I thought it wouldn't be a good idea for me to make a tutorial on this. But I am going to give you some tips to make your first Stirling engines work as easily as possible. Yeah, you heard that right. If you do a quick search on YouTube with something like Stirling engine won't work, you will find hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but dozens of videos about people showing how their engines are not able to even turn a single rotation. Now, this is a common problem with first Stirling engine builds for many people. And I can proudly say that I went through all of those phases in my learning curve. So without wasting any more time, let's get into the gory details. But first, a quick 1-minute refresher. Stirling engines are external combustion engines, which means that the release of heat happens outside the cylinder, in contrast with an internal combustion engine where the heat is released inside. They come in many flavors, but there are 3 classic ones called alpha, beta and gamma. Now, as the name suggests, the alphas are usually the strongest of the 3 because they have 2 pistons. The betas and gammas are 2 variations of the same design. They have a single piston called a power piston, a displacer, which is like a loosely fitting piston with large clearances, and sealing surfaces around the piston and displacer rods called glands. The betas have the power piston and the displacer fitted coaxially in a single cylinder, whereas the gammas have these 2 components separated into 2 different cylinders. Just as there are different types of Stirling engines, every engine can be divided into a number of smaller subsystems, such as heat exchangers, which in this case are the outer surfaces of these 2 syringes. This particular engine has a metallic wire wrapped around the hot cylinder. This is a trick used by many engine builders to improve heat transfer between the heat source, which is a small flame in many cases, to the air inside the engine. Next up, we have the air passage, which includes this transfer tube and parts of these 2 syringes. Any part of the engine that is occupied by air at some point of operation is a part of the air passage. The next subsystem is what I like to call air-to-mechanism interfaces. These are moving parts of the engine which are in contact with the air inside this passage. As you would have guessed, for an alpha engine like this, these interfaces would be both of these pistons. For a beta or gamma engine, these would be the displacer, the gland and the power piston. Next up, we have linkages. The connecting rods and these green attachment points together make linkages. These are responsible for converting the reciprocating motion of the piston to the rotary motion of the flywheel. The flywheels in turn are responsible for providing smoothness to the rotation of the engine by acting like capacitors. Lastly, we have the structure, which includes the support for the cylinder, the support for the flywheels, and the base. Now together these subsystems are host to a whole assortment of snags and hitches. but a majority of these problems can be classified into 5 broad categories: poor heat transfer, air leakage, a faulty mechanism, friction, and a weak structure. Many small Stirling engines get their heat input from an open flame that sits directly beneath the hot side piston cylinder assembly. But the heat can easily escape along the sides of the cylinder as well. This situation isn't great and leads to a lot of fuel being burned yet very little mechanical output. Okay, whatever heat made its way into the air passage will now start pressurizing the air and moving the pistons. This in turn causes the pistons to push the air between the hot and cold cylinder, and the cycle repeats. But on its way, the air could take a detour via a loose joint and escape to freedom into the atmosphere. This causes the pressure to drop abruptly and the rhythm of the motion to get disrupted. Moving past the air passage, we have now arrived at the mechanism. Looking from the top, the linkages and flywheels in your engine should either be in the same plane or parallel planes. If this is what things are looking like, then Houston, we have a problem. So we don't like any angular misalignment of the linkages. But the story doesn't end there. A poorly designed flywheel with more mass at the center than the edge or more mass in the wrong angular position can also mess things up. It's finally time to talk about friction, a force that springs into action when any two surfaces in contact start moving relative to each other. This sort of scraping action is commonly known as kinetic friction in physics, and it occurs in pretty much all moving parts of a Stirling engine, especially the pistons. As you start fixing these problems one by one, your engine will start running faster and faster. Problem is, the engine doesn't know what's supposed to move and what should remain stationary. The thing that keeps our cylinders and flywheels in place is the structure. But with enough forces, it might decide to join the party and start vibrating. This unwanted vibration is energy loss, and it becomes more and more annoying as the speed increases. We will explore each of these problems in detail in the upcoming episodes. But right now, let's talk about something far more fundamental about these engines that one should always keep on the front page of their mind while building one. By far the most important thing to understand while working with model Stirling engines is that the amount of force these glass syringe pistons can generate is minuscule. Many of us grew up playing with some form of toy motors, either directly as science fair projects or indirectly in the form of toys. These humble looking motors are incredibly cheap and they run on AA batteries, which are also cheap. However, they are highly optimized pieces of engineering, and for their size, they are generating some pretty insane amounts of forces. To get an idea of how much, try following a YouTube tutorial to make your own DC motor using a AA battery, a magnet, and a piece of copper wire. Try running a simple load with it, such as a paper spinner. Hint: try getting the motor to run itself before running a load with it. In fact, by doing this experiment, you can start to appreciate how difficult it is to turn one form of energy into another. This is especially true when you try to convert heat into motion, which is the case we want to explore for our Stirling engine. As to why this conversion is more difficult than others, that will require us to delve into the twisted world of thermodynamics, so we better leave that discussion for another episode. So coming back to our original question, why do so many model Stirling engines fail to work? Because we expect ants to push elephants. In other words, our home-built, feeble Stirling engines made from Coke cans and coat hanger wires have way too much resistance to overcome and way too little force to do the job. And the most common form of this resistance is our very first enemy: friction.